The last time I saw the sun, it was screaming, not in a way you could hear, of course. Space is quiet. It's a cold, dead quiet that gets into your bones and stays there. No! The sun screamed in light. It was a hateful, blinding yellow-white that was all wrong. Like a man showing you the whites of his eyes right before he goes insane. I was 2 billion miles away, floating in a tin can we called the lamppost. And even from here, I had to slam the viewport shields down before the glare burned my retinas out of my skull. That's a memory you don't get to put away. It just sits there, right behind your eyes, waiting for you to blink so it can play itself again. My name is Jake, and I fix things. That's what I do. Air recyclers, comms relays, nutrient paste dispensers. I'm a glorified handyman marooned at the edge of nowhere. The lamppost wasn't much, just a relay station to bounce messages deeper into the Kuiper belt, where the big helium-3 mining operations were. It was a lonely job, but it was safe. Safer than Earth, anyway. Safer than Mars. The war had been going on for so long, it felt like the normal state of things, like rain or taxes. Earth versus the Martian separatists. Brother against brother, they called it in the news feeds. The day it all ended started like any other. The station woke up before I did, its gentle hum, a constant companion. The air tasted of ozone and my own stale breath. I made coffee. A bitter, reconstituted sludge that was one of the few luxuries I had. I sat at my console. The screen showing the same old things. System diagnostics, green. Life support, green. Long-range comms, green. Everything was fine. Except it wasn't. A little red flag popped up in the corner of my main screen. An encrypted data packet, routed through a military channel I wasn't supposed to have access to. It was probably a glitch, a stray signal bouncing around the system. I should have deleted it. God, I should have deleted it and gone back to my coffee. But I didn't. Curiosity is a curse. I clicked on it. The file was a mess, corrupted and fragmented. Most of it was just digital noise, like static on an old radio. But a few words were clear. I saw Project Cinder. I saw Final Sanction. And I saw a string of numbers that looked like a countdown. A cold feeling, colder than the space outside my window, started in my gut and spread through my chest. Cinder, like what's left after a fire. I tried to run a search on the official net for the project name. The result came back instantly. Access denied. Red letters blinking on my screen. Access denied. I stood up and walked to the main viewport, the one I kept shielded now. I couldn't see the sun from here, not directly. We were on the far side of Neptune. But I could see the light it cast on the gas giant's swirling blue face. A gentle, familiar light. The light of home. The light that had warmed Earth for billions of years. That had watched the dinosaurs come and go. That had seen humanity take its first clumsy steps. Out of the caves and into the stars. I thought about the war. The endless, grinding war that had eaten my brother and my wife's parents. A war over trade routes and mineral rights, dressed up in speeches about freedom and unity. It was a rich man's squabble, and they sent the poor to die in the cold vacuum for it. We all knew it. We just didn't say it out loud. What good would it do? I went back to the console. The fragmented message was still there. I told myself it was nothing. A crossed wire, a bug in the system. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. It was the same feeling I got the day the government shuttle came to my door to tell me my brother's ship had been lost over the Olympus Mons caldera. A quiet, certain dread that tells you the world is about to change, and not for the better. I opened a private channel, one I used to troubleshoot the station's deep systems. I started running a diagnostic on the data packet, trying to clean up the noise, to see what else was hidden in the static. I was a janitor in the dark, and I had just found a locked door I never knew existed. And I was about to go looking for the key. I spent the next 12 hours working on the message. The station's hum was my only company. The coffee went cold. I forgot to eat. The nutrient paste dispenser chirped its little reminder, but I ignored it. I was a man possessed. I used every backdoor I knew, every maintenance code and system exploit I'd learned over 10 years of keeping these lonely outposts running. I felt like a burglar in my own home, tiptoeing through digital corridors that were supposed to be off limits. The more I dug, the worse the feeling got. The file wasn't a glitch. It was real. And it was a death sentence. The station logs were the first clue. I pulled up the energy readings for the entire Sol system. For the last 3 months, there had been massive, unnatural energy spikes originating from a series of research stations in close orbit around the Sun. The official reports called them solar observation posts, studying coronal mass ejections. But the energy signatures weren't for observation. They were for containment. Huge magnetic fields, stronger than anything I'd ever seen, pulsing in a coordinated rhythm. They were holding something in place, or holding something back. Then I looked at the news feeds again, the ones piped in from Earth. They were full of triumph. Victory was near. The Martian traitors were on the ropes. One final push was all it would take. There were parades in London and New York. Speeches by the High Chancellor, a grim-faced woman with eyes like chips of ice. She spoke of sacrifice, of the indomitable human spirit. She said we would never surrender our birthright. It was all lies. I knew it was lies. Our fleet had been decimated in the rings of Saturn 6 months ago. We were losing. We were losing badly. Mars had better ships, better technology. We just had more bodies to throw at them. I managed to decrypt another piece of the message. It was a technical schematic. My blood ran cold when I understood what I was looking at. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It wasn't a bomb to be aimed at a planet or a fleet. The target was the Sun itself. Yacht Cinder was a series of devices, planet-sized accelerators, that had been secretly built in the asteroid belt and then moved into the Sun's outer corona. Their purpose was to inject a stream of exotic matter, super heavy elements, directly into the star's core. The effect would be catastrophic. It would disrupt the fusion process, causing the Sun to rapidly age billions of years in a matter of minutes. It would bloat, turning into a red giant and then collapse. It was a way to turn our star into a bomb big enough to sterilize the entire solar system. I pushed back from my console, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The recycled air suddenly felt thick, unbreathable. This was insane. It was genocide on a scale that had no name. It wasn't just killing the enemy. It was burning down the whole house, the whole neighborhood, the whole world, just to make sure the other guy didn't get to live in it. The war wasn't a squabble over minerals anymore. It had become a suicide pact. The High Chancellor's words about sacrifice suddenly had a new, horrifying meaning. She wasn't talking about soldiers. She was talking about everyone. Every man, woman, and child on Earth. Every colonist on the moons of Jupiter. Every miner in the belt. All of us. I thought of my wife, Sarah. She had died 2 years ago, not in the war but from a lung sickness that the overworked doctors couldn't fix. The good medicine, the advanced tech, it all went to the front. She died in a sterile white room, her hand in mine, smelling of antiseptic. In her last days, she talked about the farm where she grew up. She talked about the smell of dirt after a rainstorm, the warmth of the real sun on her face. Simple things. The things the war had taken from everyone. And now the High Command was going to take the sun itself. They were going to burn the very memories Sarah had cherished. A wave of rage, so pure and hot it felt like it would melt my teeth, washed over me. The injustice of it was a physical weight. It was the story of humanity. A few powerful people, mad with their own importance, deciding to burn the world down, and the rest of us just had to watch. My hands were shaking as I returned to the console. The countdown I'd seen earlier was still there, ticking away in the background code of the message. 27 hours. That's all that was left. 27 hours until the end of everything I had ever known. I was a handyman on a tin can, 2 billion miles from home. What could I do? What could anyone do? The decision had been made. The machine was in motion, and the galaxy, in its cold, silent indifference, was about to be a witness to the greatest act of spite in the history of the universe. Humanity was about to burn its own sun, and I had a front row seat. I had to do something. The thought was a frantic, useless bird beating its wings against the cage of my ribs. But what? I was one man. My most powerful tool was a plasma wrench. I couldn't fly the lamppost into the sun and stop it. The station was little more than a raft, designed to float in a fixed orbit, not to sail the solar sea. My communications array was powerful, but it was designed for bouncing signals, not originating them on any wide band. I could send a message, but to who? The Martian separatists? They'd think it was a trick, a new kind of Earth propaganda. The mining colonies in the belt? They were just civilians like me, helpless. Still, I had to try. I spent the next hour trying to bypass the military firewalls, trying to broadcast what I knew. Every attempt was blocked. A cold automated response would flash on my screen. They didn't just want to kill us all. They wanted to do it without anyone screaming for help. They wanted us to die in an orderly fashion. The futility of it all washed over me. I felt like a child throwing pebbles at a battleship. I leaned back in my chair, the worn fabric groaning in the silence. The green lights on the console seemed to mock me. System diagnostics, green. Life support, green. Everything was working perfectly on my little island of existence, while the continent of humanity was preparing to slide into the sea. I thought about the people on Earth, billions of them, going about their day, worrying about their jobs, their kids, their love lives. Did any of them know? Or were they all just watching the same news feeds, cheering for a victory that would never come, blind to the funeral pyre being built around them? The injustice wasn't just the act itself. It was the lie. The grand, beautiful lie that this was somehow noble, a sacrifice. You don't sacrifice people who have no choice. That's not sacrifice, it's murder. It was the ultimate act of cowardice, dressed up as courage. The High Command couldn't stand the thought of losing, of admitting they were wrong, so they were going to flip the board and call it a draw. A draw where every piece was melted into slag. I got up and rummaged through one of my personal storage lockers. I found what I was looking for, a small, flat data chip. It had pictures on it. Sarah and me on our honeymoon standing by an ocean. The mundane, beautiful artifacts of a life that was about to be rendered meaningless. An entire species, with all its art and music and history and love, erased. Not by an asteroid, not by aliens, not by some cold, unfeeling act of nature. By a committee. A decision made in a sterile room by men and women. in clean uniforms, who had forgotten what the sun felt like on their skin. I put the chip into the console's main viewer. The pictures filled the screen one after another. Sarah's smile, the stupid look on Buster's face, my brother's confident eyes. I watched them for a long time. These were the people they were burning. This was the world they were turning to ash. Not just the dirt and the water, but the memories, the laughter, the quiet moments. It was all fuel for the fire. The countdown on the hidden screen ticked past 19 hours. I was getting tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion was setting in. There was nothing to do but wait for the show. To the sun to scream its last terrible song. And I, Jake, the handyman, the widower, the forgotten man at the edge of the dark, would be the one to hear it. The hours crawled by, time became a thick, syrupy thing. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just sat at the console, watching the pictures of my dead wife and my dead brother, while the hidden timer ticked down the seconds to the death of everything else. It was a strange kind of vigil. Awake for a world that was still alive. At one point, I found myself cleaning the nutrient paste dispenser nozzle. My hands just did it automatically. It's what I do. I fix things, even when the universe is about to break. The absurdity of it, the pathetic human need for routine in the face of annihilation, made me laugh. It was a harsh, ugly sound in the quiet station. And then, with just under 2 hours left on the clock, a new message came through. Not on the hidden military channel. This one came through the main system-wide broadcast. Every screen in the station lit up with a seal of the Earth High Command. Then the face of the High Chancellor appeared. She looked calm, composed. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly. Her eyes were as cold as ever. Behind her, a flag with a blue circle of Earth stood proudly. "My fellow citizens of the Sol system," she began. Her voice smooth and steady like a recorded announcement in a train station. "For a generation, we have fought a bitter war to preserve our unity, our heritage, our future. We have fought against a foe that would see our great civilization fractured and weakened. We have given our sons and our daughters to this noble cause." I wanted to smash the screen, noble cause. She dared to use those words. "But a time comes," she continued, her voice taking on a sad, almost religious tone, "when the cost of victory is too high. Not for us, but for the ideals we hold dear. To continue this war would be to become the very thing we are fought against, tyrants clinging to power. And so, we have made a decision, a difficult but necessary one." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air across billions of miles. "The Martian separatists wish to claim our home, our sun, as their prize. They believe they have won, but they have won nothing. For humanity's spirit is not something that can be conquered. It is a fire that, once lit, can never truly be extinguished. Today, we will prove that. We will not allow our legacy to be tainted by defeat. Instead, we will transform it. We will leave behind a monument, a testament to our will, that will burn for 10,000 years." My stomach turned. She was spinning it, spinning the apocalypse into a work of art. Project Cinder is our final answer. It is our final answer. It is our final sacrifice. We will rejoin the cosmic dust from which we came. But we will do so on our own terms, as masters of our own destiny. We will burn away the corruption, the division, the war. In our final moments, we will be one people again, united, in a glorious, cleansing fire. Let the galaxy watch. Let them see what it means to be human. We do not fade away, we do not surrender, we burn. The screen went dark. The broadcast was over, so that was it. Humanity's suicide note, delivered with a politician's smile. Glorious. Cleansing fire, she made it sound like a spa treatment. My anger was gone, replaced by a hollow, empty feeling. They weren't even mad. They were just arrogant. So arrogant that they believed they had the right to make this decision for everyone. So in love with their own ideas of legacy and honor that they would murder 8 billion people to protect them. A new icon appeared on my main screen. A simple, stark clock. It was counting down. 1 hour, 59 minutes and change. They had made it public. They were letting everyone watch the final seconds of their own lives tick away. Was it a mercy? Or was it the final, cruelest twist of the knife? Forcing everyone to stare their own death in the face. I looked at the picture of Sarah on the other screen. She was laughing, her head tilted back. It was taken on a summer day. You could almost feel the warmth coming off the screen. The warmth of a sun that was kind and life-giving. A son that didn't know it had been sentenced to death. The final hour was the longest of my life. The silence in the lamppost was absolute. The gentle hum of the machinery that had been my constant companion now sounded like a death rattle. I shut down all the non-essential systems. The lights dimmed. I was conserving power. A pointless, ingrained habit. Conserving power for what? So the station could keep my corpse at a comfortable temperature after the solar system was gone? I didn't care. It was something to do. I sat in the command chair, which was just a fancy name for a worn-out office chair, and stared out the main viewport. I'd lowered the shields to just a few percentage points of their full strength, enough to block the routine radiation but not the light. I wanted to see it. I felt like I owed it to them. To Sarah, to my brother, to the billions of people who were about to die without knowing why. I would be their witness. The man at the end of the universe, watching the lights go out. The light from the distant sun began to change. It was subtle at first. A slight brightening, a shift in the color from a gentle yellow to a harder, more brilliant white. It was like someone was slowly turning up a dimmer switch. On my sensor screen, the energy readings were going crazy. A line that had been stable for my entire life was now climbing vertically. It was a hockey stick curve straight to hell. I thought about the people on the high command station, the ones who pushed the button. Were they watching this too? Did they feel pride, remorse, or just the cold satisfaction of a job well done? I imagined them toasting each other with champagne as the energy readings climbed. A toast to the biggest, most pointless act of vandalism in history. The light grew brighter still. The blue surface of Neptune visible in the corner of my viewport seemed to shimmer, as if the paint was starting to boil. The station's heat sensors started to chime. A gentle, polite sound. Proximity heat warning. I was 2 billion miles away, and the heat was already rising. What must it be like on Earth? A beautiful sunny day getting warmer. A perfect beach day, and then a little warmer. And then your skin starts to blister, and then the oceans begin to steam. 10 minutes. The clock on the screen was a malevolent red eye. The light from the sun was no longer white. It had taken on a sick, yellowish-orange hue. It was the color of infection. The star seemed to pulse, to swell. It looked alive, and it looked angry. The gentle giver of life had been turned into a rabid beast, and it was about to bite. I thought I saw flares, massive tendrils of plasma lashing out into space, but it was hard to tell. The glare was becoming unbearable. 1 minute. My hand hovered over the control for the main viewport shield. My training, my survival instinct screamed at me to slam it shut, to hide in the dark. But I couldn't. I had to watch. I had to see it through to the end. 10 seconds. The station's alarms began to blare, not the gentle chimes anymore. These were the real ones, the loud screaming alarms that meant imminent catastrophic failure. Radiation levels critical, external temperature critical. The whole station was screaming with me. 3, 2, 1. The screaming stopped. My screaming, the station's alarms, everything. It all just stopped. For a moment, a single terrifying moment, there was only the light. It wasn't a color anymore. It was just a presence. A physical force that pushed against the viewport, that filled my eyes and my head and my soul. It was the light of creation and destruction, all rolled into one. The sun didn't explode. It didn't pop like a balloon. It unraveled. It came apart at the seams. It was a ball of yarn, and something had pulled the thread. A wave of pure incandescent rage washed through the solar system. I saw Mercury and Venus vanish from my sensor screen, not destroyed, but simply erased. Wiped clean from the slate. Then Earth. Then Mars. One by one the lights went out. Then the shock wave hit. Not a wave of sound, but of pure energy. Light and radiation and distorted gravity, all hitting my little tin can at once. The viewport shield, which I hadn't lowered, automatically slammed shut, turning a dark, absolute black. The whole station groaned, a deep, metallic scream of protest. I was thrown from my chair, hitting the opposite wall with a force that knocked the wind out of me. Red lights flashed everywhere. The world was noise and pain and shuddering metal. I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. Drowning in the dark, 2 billion miles from a home that no longer exists. But then the groaning subsided. The shuddering stopped. A few of the emergency lights flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows in the cramped command module. I was alive. The lamppost, my tough, reliable little raft, had held. I pulled myself up, my shoulder screaming in protest. The main power was out, but the emergency batteries had kicked in. Life support was still humming. Green. That beautiful, stupid green light. I stumbled back to the console. The main screens were dead. I rerouted the external sensors to a small secondary monitor. It took a minute for the image to resolve, to filter out the storm of radiation that was still washing over us. And then I saw it. Where the sun had been, there was now a hole in the universe. It was a roiling, expanding cloud of gas and dust and fire. It was beautiful in a terrible, sickening way. A cosmic wind, glowing with the ghost of a murdered star. The colors were insane. Vicious reds, deep purples, angry oranges. It was the biggest and most expensive gravestone ever made. And inside that cloud somewhere were the vaporized atoms of my wife, my brother, my dog, my planet. Everything gone. The news feeds were silent. The military channels were silent. The emergency bands were silent. The only sound was the hum of my station and the ragged sound of my own breathing. The silence was the answer. It was done. They had actually done it. The High Command had gotten its wish. They had burned it all down. I was alone. I didn't know if anyone else had survived. Maybe some of the deep-range miners in the Kuiper Belt. Maybe a few long-haul freighters that were between systems. But the heart of humanity was gone. We were a ghost species now. A handful of survivors haunting the ruins of our own creation. I looked at the swirling nebula on the screen. The Cinder. It was their monument, just like the Chancellor said. A monument to stupidity. A monument to pride. I was the curator of a museum with only one exhibit. And I was its only visitor. The galaxy had witnessed, and I was the last one left to remember why. Days turned into weeks, I don't know how many. I stopped keeping track. Time had lost its meaning. There were no more mornings, no more nights. There was only the long, endless now. I survived. That's what humans do, we survive. I fixed the main power. I patched the minor hull, breaches the shockwave had caused. I went through the motions of my job, my hands remembering the tasks my mind had forgotten how to care about. I was a robot made of meat, maintaining a tomb. The Cinder, the nebula where my home used to be, continued to expand. It was less angry now, its violent colors softening into gentler pastels. It was like a bruise that was starting to heal. A bruise on the face of the universe. I would watch it for hours, the dim ghostly light playing on the walls of my command module. I saw shapes in it sometimes. Faces, a running dog. A wave crashing on a shore that wasn't there. My mind was playing tricks on me. Or maybe it was just trying to remember. I ate the nutrient paste, I drank the recycled water. I slept, and in my sleep, I dreamed of Earth. I dreamed of green grass and blue skies. I dreamed of the smell of rain. I would wake up with tears on my cheeks, the phantom sensations fading, leaving me with the cold, sterile reality of my metal coffin. The loneliness was a physical thing. It was a weight on my chest, a constant hum in my ears. I would talk to myself just to hear a voice. I would sing old songs, my voice cracking and thin in the recycled air. I thought about ending it. The thought was always there, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. It would be so easy. A turn of a valve, a walk out of the airlock. Quick, clean. But I couldn't do it. Something held me back, a stubborn, pointless refusal to give up. Maybe it was because if I died, the story died with me. The truth of what they did. The why of it. The High Chancellor's broadcast was gone, wiped out with everything else. The fragmented military file was still on my console, a digital ghost. I was the only one who knew the whole ugly story, and so I lived. I became a keeper of ghosts. One day, something new appeared on my long-range sensors. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a ghost signal. It was a ship. And it was not human. It was huge, bigger than any vessel our civilization had ever built. It was shaped like a seed pod, or a teardrop. Its surface a smooth, featureless black that seemed to drink the light of the distant stars. It didn't approach aggressively. It just appeared a few million miles away and sat there. It was perfectly silent. No engine signature, no energy readings. Just a profound and unnerving presence. I stared at the screen for a long time. Aliens. The thing humanity had dreamed of and feared for centuries. We'd spent trillions scanning the skies, listening for a signal, a whisper from the dark. We found nothing. We concluded we were alone, and we were wrong. They had been out there all along, watching maybe. And now, after our grand final act of madness, they had decided to show up. It was the ultimate cosmic irony. The welcoming party arrives after the house has already burned to the ground. What did they want? Were they scavengers, here to pick through the wreckage? Were they conquerors, arriving to find their work already done for them? My hand went to the station's distress beacon, a useless gesture. Who would I call for help? There was no one left to call. I was the last policeman in a town of ghosts. I could do nothing but watch and wait. The alien ship stayed there for 3 full days, motionless, silent, observing my little station and the giant swirling tomb of my species. It was a test of nerves, and I was losing. The silence from the ship was more terrifying than any threat. On the 4th day, a message came. It wasn't a radio wave. It was something else. It appeared directly on my console screen, blooming into existence like a flower of light. It was a series of complex geometric patterns, shifting and evolving. It was beautiful, and I couldn't understand a word of it. I tried to respond. I sent back basic mathematical principles, prime numbers, the value of pi, the universal language, or so we had always hoped. The patterns on my screen shifted. They resolved into a simpler form, a question mark, a universal symbol for a question. And then a single word, translated into the clunky formal English of a machine that has learned a language, but not its soul. It said, "Why?" Just that one word. Why? The biggest and smallest question in the universe. They weren't here to attack. They weren't here to scavenge. They were scholars, or maybe detectives. They had arrived at the scene of the crime, and they were asking the only witness what had happened. How do you explain a species like humanity to beings who could cross the void between stars? How do you explain the High Chancellor's logic, the madness of Project Cinder, the sheer, breathtaking waste of it all? I sat in my chair for a long time, the single word glowing on my screen. Why? I could send them the technical data from the file. I could send them the energy readings of the sun's death. I could try to explain the politics, the war, the separatists, the high command. But that wasn't the real answer. That was just the excuse. The real answer was deeper, uglier. It was in our bones. It was in our history. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't speak for 8 billion dead souls, but I could show them. I accessed the data chip from my personal locker, the one with the pictures. I patched it into the outgoing signal. I sent them the picture of Sarah and me by the ocean. I sent them the picture of my brother in his uniform. I sent them the picture of Buster the dog, his tongue hanging out, his eyes full of dumb, simple love. I sent them everything I had left of a world that was good. Then I accessed the station's archive. I found a recording. A news report from years ago showing children playing in a park in a city I could no longer name. They were laughing. The sound of their laughter felt like a punch to the gut. I sent that too. And then I sent the other thing. The recording of the High Chancellor's final speech. Her cold eyes, her smooth voice talking about glorious fire and monuments. I sent them her lie. Finally, I opened a voice channel. My own voice, raw and unused, filled the quiet of the command module. It was the only sound for light years. I didn't know if they would understand the words, but I hoped they would understand the feeling. "We were afraid," I said, my voice cracking. "We were afraid of losing. We were a species that climbed out of the mud and reached for the stars, but we never let go of the mud. We loved our children and we sent them to die. We built beautiful things and we tore them down. We were capable of such kindness and such hate. And in the end, the hate won." I paused, taking a ragged breath. I looked at the swirling colors of the cinder, the grave of my world. "You ask why?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Because we were human. And we would rather burn the whole universe down than admit we were wrong." I closed the channel. The word, "why," faded from the screen. For a long time there was nothing. Just the silence and the dark. I had given my testimony. I had answered for my species. I was Jake the Handyman, the last historian. And I waited for the judgment of the galaxy. The teardrop-shaped ship just sat there, a black hole against the stars, listening. It did not move. It did not speak. It just witnessed. And in the profound, endless silence that followed, I finally understood. The silence was the only answer they needed.